Leaving the devastation of the battle camp, we soon put several hours behind us, the hundreds of heroic American defenders putting up perhaps a last great stand against the hordes of hellions continuing to rupture from the evil root forest. Glad to now be on our way, I also recognized that it would likely be a long time before I would return to my homeland of Pirapa again. Further, while my recent experiences with the hellions and the brave but likely futile defense against them was depressing, I also wanted to believe that somehow, some way, the people of America would pull together and defeat these monsters, just as Sisla had helped do a millennium earlier. Lam Tora, how in Sicelus do we stop all those hellions now? Ariana asked innocently, incensed by what all of us had just witnessed. How will our lives ever return to normal? The Sislan way will devise a plan, Sainairs responded, his faith still absolute. They are sworn to protect this world, they will rid us all of these demons. The inner circle will devise their own plan, Redfern added confidently yet respectfully. The circle is also sworn to protect the land, which they've done for nearly 1,000 years. The Sislans and the Circle hate each other, and will just bicker while the Hellions run free, Kartha conjectured, her cynicism obvious. Well, need to unite and I just don't see that happening. I agreed with Kartha and both Sainairs and Redfern rolled their eyes and shook their heads, disagreeing with me. Still, it wasn't anything to fuss about, as there was little anyone in my party could do about the situation. And with that, the conversation went silent, each of my heroes withdrawing into themselves to think about and reflect on events over the past few hours. Having witnessed the Hellions up close, and recognizing their potential for destroying the world, I couldn't help but worry that even if Kartha was right and it ultimately required the combined help of everyone within Mariga, that still may not be enough. Regardless of how many Hellions had invaded, how organized they had become and how truly vicious they were, it was clear that a second age of damnation may very well had begun. Either way, the best I could do now was become stronger and more experienced. The road here continued to lead west to east, west back to the battle camp just outside of Pirapa and east deeper into Hope Air and our destination of Nace nearly a week's march away. A few days later, we came across an obvious intersection in the road, the first we had encountered since leaving the battle camp along the Pirapa-Hope Air border. While the main road continued east and on to Nace, a smaller yet well-pruned and maintained road headed due north up into the foothills. A modest sign stood at the intersection as well, an obvious way to learn more about the second road. The sign indicated that the residence of Baron Renwald lay at the end of the road north, a local official I presumed. Does anybody know who this Baron Renwald is? Eswin began, looking about for any possible signs of trouble. There is a Lady Afra Renwald in Kathleen, Sainairs recalled, recognizing the last name. I believe she is a daughter of the Baron. Sislan protocol also dictates that any noble provide sanctuary to a Sislan cleric upon request. We can likely be afforded modest accommodations here if we wish. It would be delightful to spend the night in a warm bed, Redfern commented, grinning with the thought. Agreeing with the suggestion, I indicated that the party should turn left and head north on the smaller road, hoping to be welcomed and resting comfortably within the hour. Taking the smaller road north, it was easy to tell by the landscaping that the road here was originally excavated professionally and had been well groomed and maintained ever since. Whoever this Baron was, he was quite wealthy. As we continued north, however, we noticed a steady decline in the health and appearance of the vegetation along the road. Indeed, the further north we went, the sicker and grayer everything became. Something is very wrong, Kartha finally whispered, the cleric starting to feel physically sick. There is some sort of curse here or natural pestilence, I fear for all our safety. I agree, Ariana replied, the elf also able to sense something wrong with all the vegetation surrounding us. I don't think we should stay here long. I am not sensing anything magical, Redfern commented, using his natural talents to do so. A free night's room and board may not be worth it, Eswin instructed, drawing his blade. Perhaps we should head back. No, we should still seek this Baron, Sainairs replied, the cleric trained to always help when possible. He may need our help instead of the other way around. After a moment's thought, I nodded affirmatively, ordering everyone to push forward. Sainairs nodded his head as well, visually communicating his thanks for investigating further. Another half-mile or so later, we came across what looked like a stately manor, a small collection of newer buildings encircled by a sturdy brick wall. As we approached, however, we were constantly annoyed by a variety of biting insects. Several blackbirds eyed us hungrily and I felt as if we were being watched. The road ahead split into two, with one road leading north through the opened gate in the wall while the second road led away to the east and then further to the north back behind the Baron's manor. As we reached the split in the road, Cartha stopped and held her head, signaling with her hands to stop. Clearly something was distressing her. "Something's invading my mind," Cartha cried out, the pain quite apparent. "I sense terrible suffering, and terrible evil here." As Cartha collapsed to one knee, I motioned for the entire party to halt, quite concerned for the cleric but unsure of what to do. Cartha continued to wince in pain, then steadied herself as if locked in deep concentration. Several of my heroes stepped in Cartha's direction, wanting to help but equally as confused regarding what to do. "There is a dryad here, somewhere near the cemetery beyond," Cartha then uttered, the pain now gone and the priestess regaining her feet. "She's called out to us, we need to go save her at once." "Save her from what?" Redfern asked, looking around suspiciously. "It's always something," Eswin lamented, taking his position as the lead warrior and leading us forward. "Let's go." Traveling east along the secondary road, we reached a 90-degree turn to the left, the path leading north another 75 feet before terminating at the gates of an old cemetery. Like everywhere else around the manor, the vegetation here had all but died and we felt a heavy, oppressive evil as well. From our current vantage point, we could now see a small bell tower rising from the back of the manor, perhaps 30 feet tall and oddly menacing. Indeed, more of the same black crows we spotted on the road leading to the manor appeared perched atop the tower, watching us with the same empty, hungry eyes. "Cartha, do you still hear that voice in your head?" Redfern calmly asked. The cleric stopped for a moment and concentrated, waiting to see if she could hear anything more. Moments later, she responded to Redfern but looked at me as if issuing her report. "I don't hear her anymore, but I sense that she's up ahead in the cemetery or perhaps that grove of trees to the west." Cartha then looked up toward the bell tower to the northwest, its presence eerie and foreboding. "I also sense extreme evil coming from that tower there," Cartha whispered, afraid for our entire party. As we approached the cemetery, we encountered a wooden gate that barred our way in. Beyond the gate and wooden fence that surrounded the cemetery, we saw dozens of well-carved, aligned and orderly gravestones, indicating that the facility was neatly taken care of. However, the grass, trees and vegetation were all dead here as well, most of it shriveled up and rotting in sickening silence. To the west beyond the cemetery was a large grove of trees, a strange, dark, purple glow emanating from within. The wooden gate was stuck and it took a modest push to force it open. We then stepped forward to investigate the whole of the cemetery. At first glance, I estimated that there were around 40 graves here, divided into two areas. While the stones themselves looked fairly clean and in good condition, the surrounding vegetation was again in various stages of decomposition, emanating a stench that was hard to endure. I also noted several open holes in the ground scattered about, each about a foot in diameter and apparently dug out from within. Given all we had experienced here at the manor so far, it would not have surprised me at all if the cemetery was haunted and that the dead had been trying to escape. Nothing attacked us, fortunately, so we set about reading some of the gravestones. After some study, it became clear that roughly a third of the graves belonged to the deceased family members of the Baron, all of whom seemed to have died of natural causes over the years. The other graves belonged to the servants of the family, perhaps buried here to allow them to continue their service long after death. I sensed that the Baron's family was quite honorable and that there was no foul play associated with these graves. "What is that?" Ariana cried out, pointing to one of the nearest holes in the ground. All of us turned in time to watch several giant rats slowly climb their way up and out of the nearer holes, their eyes possessing an eerie reddish glow that could only mean one thing: they were zombies. More of the undead rats appeared from the other holes, and quickly we were attacked by 24 or so of the monsters. Although Sainairs and Cartha put their undead turning ability to good use, we were soon overcome by over a dozen of the smaller monsters and several of us were wounded before the zombie rats were defeated. "Now what?" Sainairs asked of me, offended by the monstrous rats. "This place reeks of death and dishonor, we should leave at once." Sainairs was correct in that we had left the cemetery quite a mess. While we could have just walked away, I instructed the party to instead bury the rats back into the holes in the ground and tidy up the cemetery, wanting to honor the dead buried here. About to stuff the last of the monsters into a final hole, we then noticed a human corpse lying inside. Investigating further, we soon found two desiccated bodies, an elderly man and woman, likely his wife who the zombie rats must have accidentally unearthed. Spending a few additional hours trying to determine who the deceased was, our party found the appropriate gravestone and we reburied the couple where they belonged. In doing so, we also found a little treasure that had been buried with the couple, a small diamond that I then dropped into a pocket. Approaching this grove of oak trees, the mysterious dark purple light continuing to pulse as we approached, I recognized that whatever had poisoned and putrefied the manor and all the vegetation was strongest here, likely caused by whatever was glowing within the grove. However, not everything here was quite dead, a few of the trees were still clinging to life, and that feeling of foreboding and doom we had been experiencing wasn't quite as strong here. Exploring the grove, we quickly discovered that the light was emanating from a shallow pit just to the north. Something within was causing the pulsating glow we had been witnessing. "You see my death," a frail, higher-pitched woman's voice whispered from behind. Exiting the trunk of one of the surviving oak trees was a small yet enchantingly beautiful young woman, appearing as a female elf but her skin partially covered by bark and her hair bearing dozens of colored yet withering leaves. The creature gazed upon us suspiciously with cold, vindictive eyes. She wasn't here to attack, but she also didn't trust us. As if recognizing the small woman as a friend, Kartha stepped forward to address her. "You're in trouble. My friends are here to help, you can trust us." The beautiful creature frowned at first, then began to cough, so much so that I recognized just how sick she really was. Moving slowly yet carefully so as not to frighten the young creature, Kartha took her hand, allowing the humanoid to sense the genuine warmth and altruism almost flooding from Kartha. "I am Luasia, a lone dryad of my beloved grove," the enchanting Fey woman began, deciding to trust Kartha. "All of us are in grave danger. Tell us more," Ariana added, her own elvish ancestry comforting the dryad. "Several days passed, this thing fell into my grove from where I know not," Luasia continued, pointing toward the glowing pit beyond. "It is cursed, evil, and kills everything it touches. My grove is poisoned, the land here dying, the manor beyond now demonic. If not removed immediately, I too will be slain and will rise again as something utterly horrific. What should we do?" Redfern asked with compassion. "How can we help?" "You must find a way to remove this thing that has fallen here," the dryad responded, coughing again several times as the poison continued to take its toll on her. "Without your help, I will die very soon." Ugh, the situation was quite dire for the dryad. I looked to my heroes, then pressed the dryad for more information. "Alas, there is little more I can tell you," the dryad replied honestly. "I do know that the Baron was a kind, gentle soul who didn't deserve his fate either. Let me show you something instead." Turning to the north, it only took a few minutes for us to reach a large, dead tree, a strange purple light here pulsating on the ground almost like a beacon and flooding the immediate area in an eerie, sinister glow. "Dear Sisla," Sainairs exclaimed, recognizing the object. "That's a shard from the onyx seal. It must have landed here after the seal exploded and released the Hellions." "If that's true, then the shard is infernal," Kartha replied. "We can't lift it out without some sort of magical container." "That is true, human," the dryad confirmed, standing behind me. "I believe the Baron kept a bag of holding somewhere in his manor. With that, you can extract this shard from my grove and still save me." Luasia began coughing again, this time for so long that she nearly passed out. Clearly, she had very little time left. Now recognizing what we needed to do to save the dryad, we escorted Luasia back to her tall oak tree, hoping that she could last long enough for us to recover the bag of holding from the manor beyond and return to the grove to excavate the object. The fey creature found the courage to display a faint smile, then disappeared again back into her oak tree, the poison already very close to killing her. Returning to the manor's open gate in the front of the building, we quickly discovered a broken down cart just on the other side of the old brick wall here, damaged as if caught in an explosion. Used to transport supplies to the manor, it appeared the cart had just passed through the open gate when it was destroyed, the skeletons of 2 mules, or, perhaps, bears, buried within the debris. Both Kartha and Ariana sensed more evil and darkness here, warning us to be extra careful. Searching the breach along with the immediate 15-foot wall to the west and east, I guessed that the cart was being driven by some traveling merchants when it was crushed by whatever destroyed the gate and caused the breach in the wall. Opening the ruined cart, we found 3 human bodies, dressed as merchants and confirming our suspicions. Upon closer inspection, however, the bodies appeared to not only be pitch black in color but their skin was actually bubbling, as if their bodies had been tarred and the substance still hot to the touch. Moments later, all three corpses opened their eyes and hissed at us. Infernal in nature, the monsters then climbed out of the ruined cart and attacked. And if that wasn't bad enough, the two mammal skeletons mixed in the debris also stood to their feet and attacked, all five monsters coming at us as if possessed demons. The two clerics immediately tried turning the mammal skeletons, while the rest of us concentrated on the blackened humanoids, the lemurs raking us with their sharpened claws. While we were able to soon defeat the strange creatures, we noticed that they possessed the ability to regenerate, healing their wounds throughout the battle and causing the melee to last much longer than expected. What are those blackened creatures? Eswin demanded to know, never having encountered such monstrosities before. Saint-Ayer bent down to examine one of the lemurs, its blackened skin no longer boiling but still hot to the touch. The monster beyond his experience as well, Kartha cautiously joined him to search the corpse. Saint-Ayer could barely tolerate her presence alongside him, but he found the patience to remain respectful. Do you realize what this is? Kartha asked, inspecting the corpse for herself. It's an infernal, another type of hellion. Infernals haven't walked the surface of Sicelus in over a millennium, Saint-Ayer whispered, dumbfounded. Not since the Age of Damnation? Kartha answered, not nearly as surprised by the monsters as Saint-Ayer. The monsters here quite destroyed. We then headed north into the manor's courtyard beyond, aware now that otherworldly monsters likely awaited us beyond. Dominating the space here between the manor to the north, barn and pen to the west and the stone wall encircling it all was a large and spacious garden containing dozens of plant varieties of all shapes and colors, thoughtfully arranged to provide symmetry and balance. However, everything now looked dead, withered and corrupted, a shadow of its former self, and numerous flies and other annoying insects swarmed the area. Strangely enough, it appeared that there were a few children moving about within the garden, carrying old wooden hoes to tend a garden that was now revolting in appearance. Perhaps these kids had some answers. As we stepped forward to greet the children, however, they eyed us as if we had just interrupted something very important. Worse, it only took a few moments to realize that these children weren't children at all but something much more monstrous, perhaps even demonic. Standing just 2 feet tall, these humanoid creatures appeared winged with a long tail containing a dagger-like stinger at the end. The face of each of these hellions was utterly monstrous, and all of us feared these things as they rushed at us to attack. Despite their tiny size, the 3 imps proved quite challenging. In addition to their poisonous stinger, they had the magical ability to cause fear, rendering even Eswin afraid for a time. They not only had the ability to regenerate like their lemuric brethren but required our magical weapons to harm them as well. They also seemed immune to fire. Hence, our party struggled with the imps, all of us sustaining modest wounds during the battle and requiring magic of our own to eventually put them down. The defeated creatures here within the undead garden quite bizarre. Several of my party members stepped forward to more carefully inspect the monsters lying about. While physically quite different than the lemurs encountered within the courtyard's entrance earlier, we couldn't help but feel that these monsters were also infernal, somehow spawned from the realm of nightmares and recently released by the destruction of Sisla's onyx seal. Indeed, Kartha confirmed the hypothesis moments later. These are another type of hellion, Kartha announced, she and Saint-Ayer carefully examining the corpses opposite of one another. I believe they were called imps and are also from the realm of nightmares. Perhaps, Saint-Ayer responded, deeply disturbed by their presence. The onyx seal shard must have had something to do with this. Summoning some courage, our party then entered the garden and had a look around. Again, the garden had somehow been transformed into a sickly, festering maze of disgusting vegetation. The plants were still growing but were actually undead, hundreds of flies buzzed around them, and here and there we came across some rotting fruit. It was a sight we had never before witnessed and it would likely haunt our dreams for the next several days. My party curious enough despite the danger, we soon found some gardener's clothes lying about, the clothing deposited very recently. Inspecting the clothing further, it was clear they had been worn by either humans or elves, and the fabric was clean and in good repair. Growing up on a farm herself, Ariana then smelled the clothing, almost vomiting from the terrible reek left within. These clothes smell like those imps. Those monsters are too small to fit into these, Eswin returned, not following where Ariana was going with the conversation. I don't think those creatures took the clothing from the original gardeners, Ariana stumbled, horrified by her discovery. I think those creatures are the original gardeners. Shocked, Eswin stepped over and sniffed the clothing himself, then turned back toward the slain imps several dozen feet away, soon agreeing with Ariana's hypothesis. Something transformed the people here into these monsters? The conversation fell silent for a moment, the shock of the discovery stunning all of us. Kartha was the first to speak again. And those infernal lemurs we encountered earlier, they were probably human too. Something has turned the people of the manor here into demons. Recalling our conversation with the Dryad in her sacred grove to the north of the Baron's estate, it all made perfect sense. The onyx seal shard that landed nearby had cursed the entire location, apparently turning everyone and everything into undead or, worse, infernals. Having had enough of the garden, we turned west for the barn and pens beyond. The chicken pen here had been made up of a slat 3-foot-tall wooden fence which was now quite decayed, the southern wall of the stone barn forming the pen's northern wall. A simple gate could be opened to provide access to the pen beyond, 2 or 3 dozen chickens strutting about and pecking at all manner of debris lying on the ground. I noted that along the northern wall of the pen were large quantities of hay, the likely place where these chickens would lay their eggs. The rotting wooden gate took a little wrestling to properly open, but within a few moments our party had entered the pen, keeping a wary eye out for any imminent danger. Indeed, it didn't take long for the chickens to all turn in our direction, the birds now zombified and rather slow in their pursuit of our party. However, there were a lot of them, so we needed to be careful with the little fiends. The pathetic creatures not much of a threat, we were able to quickly slay the monsters. Sainairs and Kartha weren't able to turn, taking little pride in having to cull the undead creatures. While most of the chicken pen was littered with decaying scraps of straw and other debris, large nests of rotting straw dominated the northern wall here as well. If there was anything of interest within the coop, it was likely located there. Searching through the nasty, nauseating straw along the northern wall, all we initially found were several dozen small cages, each containing a variety of rotten eggs, their stench most foul. However, our diligence then paid off, as we found 6 golden eggs within one of the coops. Nobody in the party had any idea of how these eggshells were transformed into fragile gold, but coincidence can work in strange ways sometimes, and I was more than happy to rescue a little treasure from the cage. That said, there was the problem of the damaged lock on the pen protecting the eggs. Fortunately, I was able to pick the lock with my trusty thieves' tools, securing the golden eggs and adding them to my pack. Approaching this older red wooden barn to the northwest of the manor, the large door permitting us access within seemed far more rotten than it should have been, as did the thatched roof, which was rotten in a few places and about to collapse. Standing at the door and listening carefully, we could hear some subtle noise from within, indicating that the barn was inhabited. Indeed, we even heard a few moos from what must have been cows within, although the animals sounded rather sickly. Heaving the barn door open enough to pass through, our party stepped into the darkened interior beyond, weapons drawn and ready for anything. The floor here was of hardened soil, while the walls contained dozens of pegs holding various farm implements, all of which looked rotted and dysfunctional. We did spot movement in the gloom, apparent farm hands attending to the cows that were here. To learn more, however, we would have to give the area a good search. It didn't take long to recognize that everything within the barn was dead, decaying or otherwise putrefying in some way, the smell horrible and the scene ghastly. It also didn't take long before the farm hands here approached our party. At first appearing as human children, we realized as they rushed to attack that they were definitely not human but something of another world, 2-foot-tall demonoids with vicious claws and a bite we would definitely want to avoid. Much like the bizarre imps we had faced back in the undead garden, these diminutive creatures were certainly of another world, attacking with claws and a bite that seemed poisonous, which caused an unnatural burning itch that reduced our dexterity. Further, not only could the monsters cause fear but they could apparently disappear at will, becoming invisible for a moment and making them much harder to hit. Just as bad, each time we would damage one, their wounds would start to heal automatically. Hence, we had a very difficult time with the demonoids, most of us significantly wounded, and requiring the healing powers of Sainairs and Kartha before we were able to put the 3 monsters down. While taking care of the infernal monsters here, someone in the party accidentally let loose the zombie cows that were penned up within the barn as well. Moments later, 5 zombie cows stampeded toward us, their zombification slowing them down but the monsters dangerous adversaries, nonetheless. Like normal zombies, the undead cows were deathly slow but moved silently, were very strong and had to literally be hacked to pieces for us to kill them. Must everything be dead or infernal around here? Eswin demanded to know, not trying to be funny but the comment causing a bit of a chuckle with several of my heroes. Inspecting the corpses of the smaller humanoids, both Kartha and Sainairs agreed that they were indeed infernal hellions, beings called Quasits that had not been seen throughout Mariga since the last age of damnation. Clearly, their like had returned and the situation was most unsettling. Searching one of the stalls, we soon found several bags of seeds that, according to Redfern, seemed to radiate a faint magic. There were 2 large bags here, both containing what appeared to be thousands of various seeds. Strangely enough, the interior of the bags moved slightly on their own now and again, as if something were crawling around within. To learn more, however, we needed to break the bags open. I nodded to Eswin and Ariana and the two lifted the bags high into the air before dropping them to the ground, smashing the bags open and causing hundreds of seeds to fly in all directions. As the seeds spilled about, we were surprised to find several larger seeds, more like fruit pits, scattered here and there. These seeds were dark purple in color and Redfern confirmed that they were the source of the dim magical energy he detected. However, that wasn't all we found. Mixed in with the seeds were at least a dozen small, worm-like creatures that were surprisingly fast as they turned toward us to attack. Rot grubs! Ariana cried, familiar with the tiny beasties. Don't let them bite you, or they'll eat their way directly to your heart and kill you. Despite the warning, several of the tiny, voracious monsters managed to, quite literally, get under our skin. Cutting them out was painful, but soon all the nasty rot grubs were dispatched. After making sure there were no other threats, we turned our attention back to the dark purple seeds still lying on the barn floor here, scooping them up to examine them. So, what do we have here? Sainairs asked, stepping over to me to better investigate. Anyone seen anything like this before? I've seen these kinds of magical seeds before, Redfern continued, eyeing them with great interest. If we plant one in the ground during combat, a monstrous hero will immediately spring up to fight by our side. Best we wait to use these until we need some extra help during battle. For all the monsters we had faced here in the barn, at least we had found something worth the effort. Having had enough of the barn, we quickly exited the rotting construction the same way we had entered and headed east toward the Baron's mansion. Between the barn and the mansion was a tall, sturdy well and we stopped by the well to investigate. We soon noticed two things. First, a terrible stench rose from below, and second, a human corpse lay against the well, a shiny new short sword sticking out of its rib cage. I sincerely doubted that the smell had anything to do with the demise of the human, but after several earlier bizarre encounters here at the manor, I wasn't about to dismiss anything. The bucket and winch mechanism used to draw water from below worked easily. However, the water I expected to find was instead a brown, putrefied sludge. Whatever had happened here at the manor to kill virtually everything had turned the water into something we dare not even touch, let alone drink. Examining the human corpse, all of us feared getting too close at first, lest it animate and attack. Soon, however, it became clear that the body was simply dead and we had nothing to fear. Look at that, Ariana noticed, pointing at the scabbard worn about the waist of the corpse. The sword fits the scabbard. I will bet this unfortunate soul was slain by his own weapon. Intrigued, Eswin pulled the short sword out of the corpse and closely examined it, a silvery light hinting at its magical nature. The warrior swung the blade in the air a few times, then took the scabbard from the corpse as well and fastened it to himself, Eswin securing a new magical weapon. Approaching the front door to the Baron's stately manor, we immediately recognized that while the building was once a grand, elegant construction, something had aged it unnaturally, to the point where the manor now looked over a century old. The thatched roof was also well decayed, while a dark, sinister-looking bell tower rose out of the structure to the northeast. Naturally, we would need to open the door to begin our investigation of the manor. Eswin cautioned everyone to stand back, then violently kicked the door in, attempting to break whatever lock was presumably keeping the door secure. Splinters flew everywhere and the darkness of the manor beyond was revealed. The chamber beyond appeared to be some sort of great hall, dominated by two long tables and a grand fireplace opposite us against the northern wall. Two closed doors could be seen along the eastern wall, while a large and impressive painting of someone, likely the Baron himself, separated the two doors. That was about all we could see from the open doorway. We needed to proceed north into the large chamber beyond to learn more. And that's a wrap of episode number 13, An Unnatural Sickness. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues.